Hi there, and welcome to The Defender, Wisconsin's environmental podcast. The Defender is powered by Clean Wisconsin, your environmental voice since 1970. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. Imagine a fruit that grows all over Wisconsin, in backyards, in woodlands, in gardens, and out in the wild. It's tasty, people like it, and then they try to kill it for good. The amazing story of one Wisconsin food that was banned, burned, disappeared from our plates, and the comeback that's being helped along by solar farms. That's right now on The Defender. Today we have the story of the much maligned, targeted, and totally misunderstood currant. It's a tiny fruit with a backstory full of lessons. Turns out the currant is a perennial native plant that brings plenty of benefits for our environment and is finding a new home growing among solar panels. I met Lily Hislop with the Savanna Institute at a small solar farm full of currants to find out more. I want to talk about where we're standing. So we're not standing in the middle of a patch of fruit in the middle of a farm field. We are actually near some solar panels. So what is this place and why is it special?
So we are at the UW-Madison Kegonsa Research Campus Solar and Agriculture Pilot Project. So this is an agrivoltaic experimental station. Agrivoltaic means agriculture and solar combined, where we are using this research spot put on by UW and Alliant Energy to research different applications of agriculture underneath solar panels, including trying to grow currants.
Why is there interest from the Savanna Institute in currants at all, let alone growing them here among solar panels?
Sure. So currants their species name is Ribes nigrum. It is a species of currant native to Europe, and it has a fascinating flavor that we don't have in any of the berries that we grow natively in Wisconsin. It's kind of a combination of like blackberry and blueberry and pine. It has a very deep, complex, almost a sulfury quality, but it's delicious, especially in jams. It makes the best jam that I've ever had. It's so much better than blueberry jam. Currants are within the genus Ribes, and I will be kind of referring to them interchangeably throughout this. So there's probably 200 to 350 species of Ribes across the world. It grows in Asia and Eurasia and the northern parts of Africa and all through North America. And we have about 27 species of Ribes native to the United States and North America, including many native species in Wisconsin specifically.
So, okay, we've got native currants that you've already got me interested in, like trying to find some currant jam because I'm trying to imagine what this tastes like. Why haven't I tasted this before? You know, this is a plant that is native to Wisconsin. Why isn't it all over the store shelves?
Yeah, absolutely. The main reason you don't know the currant and the vast majority of Americans have not had it or tasted it is because we had a federal ban for 55 years in the United States, banning all Ribes species from 1911 to 1966. And that was enough time to kind of remove it from our collective cultural memory.
Okay, so this is the banned fruit of Wisconsin, basically. What led to it being kind of the outlaw fruit?
Yes, okay. So we kind of have to set the scene a little bit here. So in the late 1800s, there had been wide swaths of New England that had been deforested for animal grazing and clear cutting and wood for fuel and for building in our rapidly expanding country. And collectively, the government and the people of New England decided, wait, maybe we shouldn't have done all that deforesting. Maybe we need to reforest this area. Maybe that would be a good idea. And around that time, white pine trees were very profitable. They grew pretty fast. They made a very good quality wood, and you could get a return on profit from white pines and other five-leafed pines such as sugar leaf way faster than you could other traditional hardwoods. So in this effort to reforest New England, they were going very heavily into white pine as the tree that they were doing that with. And specifically, there was like a bunch of tariff stuff where it was cheaper to send white pine seeds to Europe, grow them in nurseries in Europe, and then send the seedlings back, and there weren't tariffs on that action. So it was really cheap to import a lot of seedlings and then plant them out. Now, the challenge is the US was investing a lot of money into white pine, and they discovered in 1906 a fungus that had come back through this transition called white pine blister rust. It is Cronarium rubicola? I can never remember, and I can never pronounce it very well. But it is a fungus that needs both pine trees and ribes species to finish its life cycle. It makes these spores on pine trees, and then it has to go to a ribes plant and then make the spores there, and then it goes back to the pine trees, and that's how it, reproduces. And the government had so much money in pine that they went, okay, the ribes, the currants are an acceptable loss. We don't want to deal with them. We're going to get rid of them entirely so we don't lose our huge investment into pine trees. And so in 1911, the US put a federal ban on currants and ribes in general that included all the native species and all the European species. That was the first plant quarantines to be put in place in the United States. It banned the sale of plants and the movement of plants. And the US government hired large swaths of people to go out and eradicate ribes throughout the country, both in from farmers' fields without paying farmers, from people's backyards, going through forests and ripping out native species. And they used the Civilian Conservation Corps for this. At the peak, they had 11,000 people employed in this effort. They used war internees, like German and Italian war internees during the First World War. They used high schoolers, they used prisoners, and this was a huge effort. And the kicker is, it didn't really work, right? It turns out that these spores coming from pine trees can travel hundreds of miles. And at the same time, Europe went, we don't care about the blister rust, whatever, we'll keep the ribes, and if the pine trees die, they die. And Canada did the same thing, and Canada invested a lot into research into this fungus and research into cultivating resistant currant plants. And so their breeding programs, through the Canadian USDA equivalent, they produced several varieties of black currants that are resistant to white pine blister rust, and they don't get it and they don't spread it.
I think there are a lot of layers of lessons here with that story. Maybe one is that trying to forcefully battle nature in that way instead of working with it is not a successful plan.
Absolutely, right? It turns out that nature is really pervasive, and trying to kill all of a single thing sometimes works. We sometimes successfully drive things to extinction, but it's probably not a goal that we should be aiming for.
Yeah, good point. So the poor currants got dealt an enormous blow in the United States, but I think it explains why maybe if you go to Europe or England, currants are kind of everywhere. They're in scones or what have you.
You have stumbled on my trap card, unfortunately. So we think of currants in scones, right, in the Americas, and if you go to the baking aisle, you can find currants there. Those aren't currants.
Oh no.
We have this problem in horticulture where we name things after things because people aren't very creative. So for example, peppers and pepper, right? You have cracked black pepper and you have spicy hot peppers. And those have the same name because we named spicy hot peppers after the cracked pepper because they both have a little bit of that heat to them, even though they're wildly different species. So black currants are called Ribes nigrum. That their closest horticultural relative is peonies. And then we have Xanthi currants, which you can get in the baking aisle. Xanthi currants are grapes. Those are also called Corinth grapes. They come from a region called Corinth in Greece. And currants were named after Corinth grapes because they look kind of similar.
I love that. Look kind of similar, sort of.
Small blackberries, right?
Okay, so lesson number one, Currants native to Wisconsin are not tiny raisins.
Currants native to Wisconsin are not tiny raisins, absolutely.
Okay, and lesson number 2, don't try to eradicate something on purpose because that's not going to be a good idea.
Absolutely, yep.
And so, lesson number 3, I think, is one that would be important to talk about. You're from the Savanna Institute, so there's got to be, I think, an environmentally important reason that you care about currants. What is it?
Yes. So the Savanna Institute is a agroforestry nonprofit trying to put more trees on farms for a host of different ecological and economic benefits and social benefits. And I'm excited about currants as an agroforestry crop for a lot of different reasons. I think their flavor is unparalleled, and there's a niche in the culinary world of the United States that could really utilize currants. Additionally, we don't have a very big industry for it here. So before the ban, we were growing about 7,500 acres of currants in the United States every year, which is about on par with like blackberries now. So like they're not the most common fruit, but you've eaten a blackberry, you can get access to a blackberry. Now we're growing about 450 acres of currants in the United States, which is less than papaya, but more than loganberries.
And I've heard of one of those things, so that's good.
So, like, there's a big niche here, right? Like, it is not a blueberry where we are growing a lot of blueberries very efficiently and you need to, like, have a lot of acreage to eke out a profit margin, right? There is some people who know what currants are and have high demand for it, and you can sell currants for a pretty good price, like $8 a pint or whatever. And since you're kind of the only person growing it in your region, you can probably find your markets pretty easily. We have a buyer in New York who's like, I would take a semi-truck of currants every week if you had it for me, right? Like, so there's where it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg of, I think this is a good product and there should be demand for it, but I also need to make sure I have supply for it, and we want to scale those up at the same time.
So currants, well, I have a few thoughts and questions. First, I think it's unfortunate that the other kind of currant, the grape kind, is all people know because we didn't have native currants that we were eating here for more than a half century, and so maybe there's a little bit of a brand confusion problem, but also I think the concept of currents as helping solve an environmental problem is interesting because you have a crop that I'm going to guess is pretty easy to grow around a lot of things like trees, or in this case, like solar panels.
Sure, yeah. Currants are pretty hardy in terms of where they can grow and what environments they can grow. They don't mind a little bit of shade. They're a forest dwelling plant. So like growing them under solar panels or within a context of a higher story tree like a chestnut, they kind of blend pretty well with that. And they aren't too bad with deer predation. Deer typically don't like to eat them, which is helpful. And I'm all for farms that just have more species on them in general. And if you're growing currants, it can help provide a more diversified farm. I also think so in Europe, for example, as you mentioned, it's much more well known. You can probably find currants on menus, like on beverage menus, about as commonly as you can find them, as you can find like lemonade at restaurants here. Like most restaurants you go to, you can find a Ribena, which is a currant-based beverage, on a menu, right? And my theory is we don't have that in the US because right around the time of the ban in the early 1900s was when we started as a country doing a lot more mass productions of foods and development of like confections like jellos and sodas and hard candies and things like that that were more mass produced and widely spread. And around that time, I feel like we kind of set our cultural palate, right? Like if you get a yellow candy and you don't have a label for it, you're probably going to assume that it's lemon. And if you get a purple candy, you're probably going to assume that it's grape, right? And in Europe, they had that develop with currants available as an ingredient, so they associate purple with black currant flavor, right? Like the Skittles in England, the purple ones are black currant, whereas here they're grape.
Okay, you're blowing my mind with that one.
So like we kind of set our cultural palate of like, these are the colors and these are the flavors we associate with them in the early 1900s. And so that's also kind of the reason we don't have currant as a flavor in our lexicon. But we see in these days that people are excited about new flavors and they want to eat interesting and unique things, and they're willing to explore outside of the set palette, right? Like nowadays, if you have a candy that's orange, it's probably orange, but increasingly it might be mango, right? You wouldn't be surprised to find a mango candy. And I think we could do the same thing with black currant.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so interesting because I think about one of my son's favorite flavors is blue raspberry,
Oh,
which
sure.
is that even a thing?
No, that's not a thing. But like, we have so many red things already. You need to differentiate, right? How do you tell the difference between a cherry and a strawberry and a watermelon and a raspberry? Well, you make the raspberry blue, I guess.
Right. So I think that you're right. There is this sort of like, well, we need a new thing. What is the new flavor out there? What do you think is the future for Wisconsin grown currants then? I mean, I know we're here at this experimental research facility. They're growing and I guess thriving among solar panels. Does that help you or make you feel optimistic and excited about our apparently really awesome currants?
I'm so excited. I've said it. I think currants are such a cool plant and they're such good flavor, but I'm really excited about the prospect of agrivoltaics as a way to expand and morph how agriculture works in Wisconsin, at least on a small scale. We don't need that many solar panels on the ground to fuel the entire country or to fuel the entire state. I think like this statistic's not going to be right, but it's going to be in the rough ballpark. Like if we used 0.5% of agricultural land in Wisconsin that would provide 50% of the state's energy needs, which like 0.5% of the agricultural land's not that much. And like there's this, at least in my world, where we're looking a lot at perennials and trees and nuts, and turns out perennials are a big investment in terms of time and money, right? It costs a lot of money to get a tree in the ground, and it also costs a lot of time before you can get a crop out of that tree, right? And currants are pretty fast in this. Like you can get your first crop of currants probably 3 years after you plant a bare root plant, for example. But there's this like challenge if you are not a landowning person that wants to farm. It's hard to find leases that are long-term enough that you can put trees in the ground and not feel like you're going to have them be ripped up or like be uncertain about your future with them, right? It's usually leases are going to be 1 to 2 years long, not 10 years or 20 years, like you really want to get a good quality product out of a tree crop, right? And get your investment back. And agrivoltaics present a really unique opportunity where the solar company that is working with the landowner is going to have a 20-year lease. So the landowner might be more willing to sign a longer-term lease to someone growing among the solar panels. I've been talking to a lot of solar companies who are required to do agrivoltaics as part of their permits. And in order to put their solar panels in the ground, they have to have something growing. So the landowner is already getting a payment from something being on the land already. So the land lease itself for growing something there might be really cheap to free depending on the scenario, right? I've been offered a fair amount of experimental land just for free because they want something growing there and they're going to be managing a plant underneath it anyways, whether that's a perennial prairie system or a grazing system for sheep or whatever. They're like excited about having plants underneath the panels. Most of these panels that are going in Wisconsin are bifacial, which means that they get light from both the top and the back side of the panel, and light reflecting off plants actually gets a pretty good energy return on the back side of the panels. It's way better than like black ground or soil, right? And usually these solar facilities, solar installations come with fence put in already, and deer fence is a huge expense for someone who's wanting to grow trees. So to have a fence that someone else has to manage, that's really sick.
So I think I can tell by talking to you how totally excited you are about the prospect of having more places to grow currants and farmers being able to really pair these things with solar and get a return on their investment and all these good things. What got you excited, I think, in uh, about plants or currants in the first place? How'd this all start for you?
I got excited about plants through the awe and wonder at having an organism grow like a unit of food and how cool that is. I'm like fascinated by apples and just like it's food that grows from a tree. How much more wonderful could that be? And I am coming at this from my love of flavor and a love of plant-based flavors. So I did my PhD in sweet corn, which was a delicious plant. It's really, really good. And then I worked on blueberries for a while, and the range of flavors that you can get from a blueberry is really fascinating. And so I am really excited about habitat expansion as a second passion of mine. So to find an intersection where I can think and talk a lot about flavor and good food and also talk about habitat expansion and the ways that we can have our agricultural land meet in the middle where it's not conservation and it's not pure efficient agriculture, but it kind of has this middle ground of being both productive land that is also good for the animals and the insects and the soils and the water quality is so fulfilling.
So you brought an example of a currant plant that does have this rust.
I did. So I am a breeder for the Savanna Institute. My job is to make new kinds of currants that are adapted to Wisconsin and the Midwest at large. And one of the big challenges is to make sure they are resistant to white pine blister rust. I really don't want to get another ban on the books. I do not want to push this envelope. So everything that I produce from my breeding program is going to be white pine blister rust resistant. So out in Spring Green, Wisconsin, I have a field full of 3,000 currant seedlings that I can evaluate based off of flavor and based off of white pine blister rust. And I thought I was going to be doing an assay this year where I pick like a leaf off of every tree and test it for white pine blister rust in the lab and see what's resistant and what's not. But I was very fortunate with a huge infestation this year.
So it was just like right there for you to see.
Oh, it saved me so much time. So I went to my field yesterday and I picked a bunch of plants that have white pine blister rust on them. So currant plants have a very strong aroma. It's a little bit like a little sulfury, a little fruity, a little maybe minty. And so as you like touch the plants, you can smell the currant aroma on them. And on the back side of these leaves, it looks like a Cheeto Puff has been dancing, where there's little orange spores that are just, smattered around the leaf. You can't really tell it from the top. There's also a different disease on these leaves called, I think this is Septoria leaf spot. So that's a red herring. That's not actually but on the backside, you can see the spores. And yeah, that's what white pine blister rust looks like. It impacts currants a little bit. They get a little sick. They don't love it. They don't photosynthesize as well, and their leaves might like shrivel up and die, but it's survivable for them. And white pine, it kills white pines.
So should we be worried that this is out in the open? I mean, from the reaction in the early 1900s, it was like if I saw this, I would immediately, light it on fire or something. But is it as scary as all that?
I think it's something we still need to be cautious and wary about. But we do have resistant white pines now as well, in addition to resistant currants. So these ones aren't resistant, obviously, because this is research, and I'm trying to find ones that are resistant. But all the currants that I have growing in that field in the Kaganza research site are resistant to white pine blister rust. And the white pines in the area are probably susceptible, but at least for this infestation, I keep it managed. I try not let the spores travel very far. The spores don't travel as far from the currants as they do from the pine trees. Also, they travel like thousands of feet instead of hundreds of miles.
I guess they're not tall and in the wind too, so.
Yeah, totally. And if you really want currants in your yard or in your farm and you really want to grow not resistant varieties that are susceptible to white pine blister rust, because there are still plenty, you can manage it through mineral oil applications, especially during the sporifying season. You can spray mineral oil on your plants every 2 weeks, and that really keeps the spores down and from traveling.
So are you optimistic that someday soonish, we can go into a grocery store, and among the blackberry jelly and the strawberry jelly and the blueberry and all the flavors, that there's going to be a place for currants in our grocery stores.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you can find currants in grocery stores now if you go to the correct grocery stores. So, for example, like Willie Street Co-op has black currant jelly on the shelves. Local growers are growing currants. For example, the Land of O's, is a farm and jam and jelly maker that has currant jelly, and I saw it at the Madison Farmers Market this year, at least one booth. So I'm excited and I'm optimistic, and I think this is a flavor that has, I'm starting to see the beginnings of more exposure, and I'm really excited for that to catch on more.
And solar farm friendly.
And solar farm friendly. And lots of other kinds of farm friendly.
Thank you so much for taking the time to first meet me out here at this awesome experimental agrivoltaic site, and also just explaining what I think is the fascinating story of Wisconsin currants.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening to The Defender. For all kinds of photos and more information about currants, take a look at the show notes or log on to cleanwisconsin.org. And if you like the show, please leave a review. It helps other people find us. I'm Amy Barrilleaux. Talk to you later.